Okay, I want to have a look now at the ethics involved in the business environment. And if we're thinking of ethics, we need to actually decide what they are. So let's actually have a look at a definition here. We'll have a look at a definition by Mullins. And Mullins describes ethics as ethics are concerned with the study of morality, practices and activities that are considered to be importantly right or wrong, together with the rules that govern these activities and the way to which these activities relate. So he's saying he's concerned with morality, the practices and activities which are considered to be right or wrong, together with the rules which govern them and the way to look at how these activities relate. Just going to have a look at ethics in three areas here. I'm going to start off by looking at the individual ethics and think, well, what are these? And I suppose you could say that the individual efforts are that person's personal beliefs about whether a behaviour, action or decision is right or wrong. And I think ethics defined in the context of an individual, that people have the ethics rather than an organisation. And I think ethical behaviour really varies from one person to another. So one person coming into the classroom may find a £20 note on the floor and say, finders keepers, and puts it in their pocket. Whereas another person's ethical behaviour, if they find this £20 note, will go straight away and hand it in. So I think that ethical behaviour is very much in the eye of the beholder, as the term often says, and I think it refers to the behaviours which seem to be generally the accepted and the social norms. So if that describes ethical behaviour, then I think to describe unethical behaviour, we would actually be looking at behaviour which does not conform to the generally accepted or social norms. So ethical behaviour does conform, whereas the unethical behaviour doesn't conform. And we'll actually be looking at an exercise in class, and we'll be looking at this in more detail. I think it's important to note that there's no single view on right or wrong. And one school of thought emphasises ethical behaviour very much as the duties to be done or the duties to be refrained from. But the consequentialist view holds that goodness or badness depends on the consequences of what could happen. So perhaps for some it's actually seen as means to an end. If we looked at the managerial ethics, now these really are the standards of behaviour that guide individual managers in their work. And I think one important area in managerial ethics is the way they treat the staff, the treatment of employees in their areas, the way they hire people and fire them, the wages, working conditions, the employee privacy and respect. So many ethical issues in an organisation actually stem from how an employee treats the organisation. And this is particularly in regard to a conflict of interest, secrecy, confidentiality and honesty. So what actually is then a conflict of interest? Well, a conflict of interest occurs when an employee's decision potentially benefits the individual to the detriment of the organisation. So it's when that person's decision potentially benefits them rather than the organisation. So let's just put this as an example. It might be you are a designer in a arts media marketing company, and somebody actually comes along and you give them a price for the company. You say, yes, I can do that job for you, and it's £1,000. But actually, I could do that work for you, and I would only charge you £500. That's just an example of a conflict of interest. So what they do to guard against this, the majority of organisations have policies. Also policies to ban buyers from accepting gifts from suppliers. Because after all, if that supplier has given you a holiday or given you a car or something nice, then actually you may be more inclined to use them to supply your company. Obviously, divulging company secrets is always clearly unethical. If you think about things like fashion designs, if you're working with a company that's coming up with a fashion design, it'll be wrong to steal it to give it to another company. And I think perhaps sometimes IT employees may be tempted to sell information about a company's plans to competitors. Honesty is an issue in general, and there are lots of common issues relating to this, and you have to have clear policies and procedures in plans to actually look at what you're allowed to do and what you're not, and what will happen if the rules are broken. And I'm thinking in terms of things like long distance phone calls on business telephones, perhaps updating Facebook during working hours, stealing stock, fiddling the expenses. Fortunately, most employees are actually inherently honest, but obviously organisations have got to be vigilant to avoid the problems and behaviours. Managerial ethics can also come into play in the relationship between the firm and its employees with other economic agents. So thinking of things like the customers, the competitors, the stockholders, stakeholders, suppliers, dealers, and the unions. And the behaviour between the organisations and these agents may be subject to ethical ambiguity, perhaps in advertising and promotion, financial disclosures, orders and purchasing, shipping and solicitations, bargaining and negotiation, and other business relationships. And this is something we'll talk about later. There's obviously a need very much to ensure that ethical behaviour is managed. How is ethical behaviour going to be managed? And ethical scandals have become so more common now, from business to politics to entertainment to sports. I mean, look at all the hassle there's been over FIFA. And I think it's fair to say the scandals have actually rocked the moral integrity of our society. So many businesses do now have codes of ethics. This is generally like a formal written statement of the values and ethical standards that guides an organisation's actions. Making ethical choices for a manager, though, can often lead to very unpleasant outcomes. It could be firing someone. It could be by being rejected by colleagues because you're standing up against it. And the forfeiture of monetary gain, you could be turning down backhanders, so to speak. But it's really important that managers have to be prepared to confront their own conscience and to weigh the options up when making difficult decisions.